Another common piece of evidence that I'm given is that Christianity still exists despite intense persecution of the Roman Empire when it was kind of getting its start. And so the objection to that is actually pretty simple and boring. And I've got a couple sources here that you can check out. But essentially, it comes down to Christianity's persecution didn't really exist until 303 CE. Until then, the only persecution was the occasional scapegoat, you using Christians as a scapegoat. So there was some big fire, I guess, and they wanted to blame Christians, so they did a brief persecution of them, not because of that. You can look up something about the fire, and there's the occasional angry pagan mob here and there, and that's pretty much it. It was just like hyper local, the occasional local city persecuting temporarily, but there was no statewide or empire wide until the Diocletian persecution, Diocletianic. And so basically what they did is they purged the army of all Christians. They required them to make public sacrifices. Empire-wide persecution began. There were burned books. Then they ordered all gatherings of Christianity to cease. So like church events and all that had to stop. All officials lost their post, so any Christian who was in power lost their power, and forced public gatherings that everyone must attend to make public sacrifices or they were executed. And so that sounds like something that would kill Christianity. But the reality is, some renounced their faith publicly but still worshiped the Christian God. Some surrendered to less important texts while keeping the valuable ones, because at this time the Bible hadn't been then created yet. So maybe somebody got rid of Matthew, another person got rid of Mark while hiding the other ones. So the Bible, or all the texts, were still to remain intact, or at least in existence, just they were stamped out a little bit. And then I guess other preachers preached that renunciation was not a sin, and the biggest thing was that persecution was not actually empire-wide. So it technically was, but the Western emperors didn't really care as much. So Britain and Gaul, they announced the edict, or I don't know if they said edict, but they announced something, but never bothered with the rest of, whatever the laws or documents were. And they also didn't persecute Christians nearly as harshly as they did in the East. So basically, the Christianity was still growing and doing just fine in Britain and Gaul and other Western areas. It was only persecuted harshly in the Eastern regions. So that kind of explains why Christianity was able to survive.